Hello, hello. We have a full panel. Breaking all the rules today.
Hey.
6 people. So
We're trying to keep it interesting.
What's that?
We're trying to keep it interesting.
Yeah.
There's a chiropractor just outside waiting for us after we spend the next.
Good stuff, good stuff, good stuff. Reddit, dubbed the front page of the internet. It's the community that we all know and love. If you all can, for instance, do down the line, introduce yourselves, and we go from there.
Cool. Hi, everyone. My name is Zubair Jandali. I lead advertising sales at Reddit, where I've worked for 2 years now.
I'm Melissa Tidwell. I am the general counsel in charge of legal policy and comms, and I've been there for about 14 months.
Hi, I'm Katelin Holloway. I'm the VP of People and Culture, and I've been with Reddit now for just under a year.
I'm Nick Caldwell. I'm VP of Engineering at Reddit. I literally started 2 weeks ago.
Glad to have you, Nick. I'm Steve Huffman. I'm the co-founder and CEO, and I've been back at Reddit about a year and a half now.
Great, great. So this panel is called Reddit CEO and Executive Team. But before we dive into some of our topics, I'd love to hear the journey, how each one of you got to where you are today. I think it's important. We all didn't just wake up and being executives and being tech, but yeah, you can share briefly, like what was your career path like?
So I grew up in the East Bay and didn't grow up in a home where technology, neither of my parents were technologists, and so I didn't have exposure to all the action that was happening in Silicon Valley, even as there was a lot of vitality there. When I got to college is when I was sort of sensitized to this all happening in my backyard. And Berkeley, which is where I went to college, has obviously a large computer science and electrical engineering department. Not that I had the will to major in either of those. And so after college, I joined a startup. After that, I joined another startup that was smaller and spent about 4 years there. That company was acquired by Google. I joined Reddit from Google, and part of what teased my interest in Reddit was actually a personal experience that someone very dear to me had gone through. This person had grown up in a very deeply devout religious home and went through a deconversion process that's a very difficult personal journey to go through, and one that isn't typically accommodated in places of worship. And so he actually looked to Reddit to find a home and to share his experience and hear from others who'd gone through something similar. And that was the initial sort of push for me to really explore this.
I feel like that's a good question. The short version is that I was an M&A attorney in New York and was always interested in tech. I moved out to the Bay Area, and I think really my journey I would credit to David Drummond, who spoke on a panel earlier. I applied online, and David made it a point to ensure that I want to see people of color, and so I think sort of where I am today. I think directly starts off with David and Hasha, who's the recruiter that I still remember. And I spent 8 years at Google and started at Reddit. And I think similar to Zubair, I think I was just always intrigued by the platform. There's a lot of both positive and negative things, and I think there's so many interesting things that happen that I was just really pulled to it.
So I'm a hustler. I did not go to a great school. I went to a state school. It was fine. I was really lost in my career. I didn't know what I wanted to do when I grew up. I did a number of things, from being a public school educator to working in the hedge fund field to a plethora of other things. But I really found my way once I made it to Pixar Animation Studios. I decided at some point in my career that I wanted to start over, to really find myself and find a creative space. So I applied for an assistant position. Was lucky enough and fortunate enough to be placed under the executive team during the Disney merger acquisition. And that was where I was really exposed to culture for the first time. So institutional culture is a really tangible, meaningful thing. So I was very lucky to be in the right place at the right time. So I spent 5 years at Pixar, made my way into tech on accident, and then through a series of various startups and acquisitions, was put in front of Reddit, and I was very intrigued about the culture that they were building and the start that they were trying to rebuild, and so I decided to join the team out of curiosity.
I think my career in technology really started with my father really early on. He owned, I don't know if you guys are old enough to remember this, a Tandy 1000 computer.
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
MS-DOS like 2.0 on it. And I remember, very young age, like sitting on his knees, like trying to type. That combined with the fact that we grew up in PG County, Maryland. I don't know if you guys are familiar with that, but it's where Wale grew up, if you guys know who Wale is. But it's not really the most up-and-coming environment. I really, from an early on age, wanted to get out of PG County, Maryland to become a success. And the tools that I had at my disposal were that Tandy 1000. So early on, I really, saw technology as a pathway to a much better life. And that long story short, that led me to ultimately going to school at MIT, and then starting my career at Microsoft, where I ended up working for 15 years. I started at Microsoft as an intern, and managed to work my way up through a series of internal projects to a partner-level general manager in 12 years. And that came from taking the right bets, but I also think it came from learning how to build really great teams. So I ended up here at Reddit in part because of my technical background and experience, but I think where Reddit is right now, it's at a stage where it's about to grow. And where bringing someone like me in is going to bring a little bit more of that maturity and ability to do management that we're going to need as the company scales. So that's why I'm at Reddit. I also love the platform, by the way. It does kick ass. I've been a Redditor for 8 years.
Steve.
So I was very fortunate to get introduced to programming when I was a little kid by my father, and doubly fortunate that that first hobby, passion of mine turned into be a very good career for me. So I've been an engineer all my life, really, and studied computer science through college. Really wanted to start a company, and I did so with my college roommate for 4 years, Alexis, and we started Reddit. We didn't know what we were building with Reddit. We were really just kind of going with the flow, shooting from the hip, just every day doing what felt like the best thing for the site or the most fun thing to do. And which led us, because we didn't have a grand vision for Reddit, led us to kind of sell the company early, which we did in 2006. I left the company in 2009 because Reddit was all I'd known at the time, and I felt like I wanted to do more things, try other skills, have a different experience. So I left and I started another company called Hitmonk, which couldn't be more different from Reddit. We sell plane tickets and hotel reservations, which turned out in hindsight to be a tremendously good experience for me because I learned how to run a business in a very cutthroat environment. During those 5 years at Hitmonk, slinging plane tickets, Reddit continued to grow about 50x and grew tremendously in terms of number of employees as well. Reddit saw some hard times, which led me to come back in July of last year. And so I've been back at Reddit about a year and a half now, and I feel so grateful to have this opportunity. Not many people get this opportunity once, and I'm very fortunate to have had it twice. And I really want to make the most of it. And so I think we've done a lot in the last year. We've got a tremendous amount to do going forward. And I'm so very thankful to have you all helping drive the ship as we try to chase our dreams.
Awesome, awesome. Some of you on the panel, you touched on the point that you feel like now is the time for Reddit to grow and kind of the next phase. Data received says Reddit has over 240 million global users monthly. But for the first time in 11-year history, Reddit has an executive team, has a diverse executive team. We're at Tech Inclusion Conference. Why do you feel like now is the right time to focus more on inclusion internally and externally on the platform? And what are some things you're doing around that?
Who wants to start?
I'll do that one. So Reddit is large now, 250 million users. But there are a lot more people in the world and a lot more people online. And we believe all of those people should have a home on Reddit. What Reddit provides is a place where you can be yourself, where you can find your home. Reddit is home to many thousands of communities that cover just about anything. And we want Reddit to be as welcoming and as broad as possible, which means if we want our platform to be as diverse as possible, we need our company to be as diverse as possible as well. For us, the two are very tightly intertwined. If we want to have coverage all over the globe and be a home for just about anybody, we need to make sure that at Reddit we have those perspectives on our team, so we can build the right things, so we can take people's opinions and perspectives into account while we build things. And so for us, it's a very natural, not only is it the right thing to do, it's like a very natural business need for us as well.
But also, I think, like, to your question of like why now, I think the difference is that like we all come from very, this is only half the executive team, and we all come from very diverse backgrounds. And so for us, it's also just a top of mind issue. I mean, I think like Zubair and I were chatting, this is not the first conversation we're having about diversity. We're all, we all care about it. It's something I've always thought about. We were chatting the other day about sort of how do you think about it when you're hiring your team and how you grow your team, and sort of, and the organization, of like how do you explain to the organization like why you care about it?
And from a very practical perspective, we're about to grow fairly quickly, and I want to solve this thing now. It's better to embed the idea of diversity and inclusiveness deep into the DNA of the company while it's still small, and as we get bigger, that'll grow with us.
I'll add to that, since my team is the one that's tasked with actually managing the frameworks for how we address this. So I joined the company back in January, and we were just about 70 people, give or take, and we're only 140 now. I think that's something that, as Nick said, if we don't address this now, it's going to only be that much more difficult later. So I joined the team as the head of people and culture, and Steve immediately gave me permission to build my team as I saw fit. And so housed under the people and cultural umbrella, we have, of course, talent acquisition, and we're hiring like mad. As Nick says, we're doubling in size again in this next year. And then we have the administration team, the facilities and workplace teams, and then the people ops teams. And all of us on our team are charged with some component and some function of diversity and inclusion. But really, it's not a people and culture function or challenge. We're just the ones guided with creating the frameworks and executing against it. This is really a challenge for the whole team, not just the executive team, but the whole company. And we're very, very fortunate that the entire company cares very deeply about it, so it makes our jobs really easy.
Jump in there?
I think it was said well by the entire group. So,
Cool. Awesome. I have a question for you too.
Okay.
But I'll get to you later. So, Nick, you're a new VP engineer. We don't have that many diverse VP engineering in tech as a whole.
Yeah, when I got this job, someone told me I was the only VP of engineering of a company this size in Silicon Valley. I don't think that's true. I hope it's not true. Yeah, but I'll certainly.
Sad if that's true.
I'll try and be one of the best.
Yeah. But how many employees you have?
140.
140. That could be possible. It's sad if it's true. The only diverse. It's sad it's true, but so how do we get more Nicks of all different backgrounds, ethnic groups, races, genders, to be in leadership positions, such as in engineering leadership positions?
Yeah, I'm an engineer, so I come at these things with very simple answers, and it really just comes down to putting the effort in. I think the first or second day I got this job, I sat down with Katelin, and this is what we talked about. Not just because Reddit is growing and it's important to think about how we're going to grow, but diversity and inclusiveness as a part of that conversation. So very practically speaking, in previous teams that I've built, I've found that the most successful way to end up with a diverse organization is to focus on the leadership layer. And where Reddit is right now is we're hiring quite a few engineering managers. So anyone in the audience aspires to be an engineering manager, this would be a really good time to apply. And I want to make sure that a significant portion of those are diverse hires. And what I found in the past is that you hire diverse people, and they're going to work their network and bring more diverse people into your organization. So I'm going to start that right now.
That's great. And Katelin, some of the work that you're doing around recruiting and hiring diverse people is starting to take place. Can you talk about some of that?
Yeah, I think, I will start by saying we are just at the very beginning of our journey. As I mentioned, I've just only built out my team in January, but the frameworks that we're approaching this from, because this is not a simple question. I mean, that's why we're all here today, right? That's why we were all here yesterday. Like, there's a reason that we have conferences like these. Because we want answers, and we want to be a part of the conversation, and there is not one solution. And so when we're thinking about how we're going to build out initiatives and how we're going to build programs that don't just support the pipeline issue, but all the way through the employee experience, it's really holistic. So we're doing our best along with everyone else to try to figure out how we're going to make this digestible. And so by breaking it down into a few different groups to kind of tackle together. We have of course, the recruiting challenge. There's a huge educational component that is top to bottom, again, from start to finish through an employee life cycle. And then there is, of course, retention. You want to make sure that the inclusive part is there and people have a deep sense of belonging. And then development. So making sure that you have bias-free performance review systems, making sure that the conversations and language that you use, making sure that you have the communication forums set up in the right way that address all different walks of life. So it really is the process from start to finish. And if Reddit really wants to be a destination employer and really keep people for as long as we can and keep them happy and keep them thriving, we have to address it from the whole scope.
And Melissa, you are in the intersectionality category. I hate to categorize people, apologies of offending you, but African American woman in tech, legal background. At the same time, we all know there's a perception of Reddit. There's a good perception. There's just like subreddits. How did you deal with those perceptions being a African American woman in the company, and how do you deal with those before you joined? Like, what was your thought process?
It's a good question. I think in terms of, I think Reddit for sure has a certain perception. I think the reality of that is the content that people talk about is probably less than 2% of the content on the site itself. And I was hired by Ellen, and I've stayed working with Steve because I think what is inspiring to me is you see the crazy stories on Reddit of people really feeling the sense of belonging. And I think, like, as an example, there was a couple, maybe a month ago of a Syrian person talking in an LGBT subreddit about not like, yes, the war in Syria is going on, but I'm also gay. And like, I live in this culture that is war-torn. I don't know what to do. I'm questioning whether or not I should take my life. And you have strangers literally from around the world saying, giving advice of, this is if you're gay, like that's a criteria for that you should go to the UN and you can get asylum. Or somebody in the south of England saying, I run a hotel, like we can get a work visa for you to come here, right? That to me is much more meaningful and much more reflective of both the site and the company. That's the passion that I think everyone within the company shares of wanting to ensure that capability exists for people in the world, especially where we are today, where it is controversial and there is a lot of negativity. Giving people a place to be honest and not, and to have that pseudo-anonymity, which we think is important, to be able to have a conversation and to have disagreements, but on a platform that allows the conversation.
That's great. Thank you.
If I could jump in with a personal, this is not anywhere near the Syrian situation or suicide by any means, but before I joined the company, I really turned to Reddit as a new mother. I had just had a baby. I was having struggles. This is very personal, Wayne. I'm going to talk just to you.
I think Reddit is very personal. We all very personal.
Yeah.
I was really struggling after I had my child. I was working between 2 different tech companies, going through an acquisition, fundraising, and also struggling with some postpartum depression. And to be very just specific, I could not breastfeed my child. I was struggling with that. And Reddit gave me a place that I could actually have a private conversation where I didn't have time to go to a mommy group. I didn't have time to find a local community. San Francisco doesn't have a lot of families, and especially in my network, choosing to stay in San Francisco. And so Reddit actually gave me a space, a very safe space, and a home to be able to have some very raw, very honest, very emotional conversations in a space that I didn't feel judged. And so just strictly based on that, I think that what we're trying to say is like being able to surface these communities to everyone is all of our mission, because there really is a home for everyone on Reddit. It's just a matter of finding it.
That's great. Thank you.
I'll add one thing. I think each person, aside from Steve, who was the founder, approached the opportunity with probably some amount of ambivalence or questioning what we'd heard, the popular perceptions of Reddit, and how much truth there was to it in the context of our own personal identities. And one of the things, I shared the example that prompted me to really take a keen interest in Reddit. There's also an aspect of the platform which is just core to every single one of the 45,000 communities on the site, and that is Reddit's centripetal object is the idea, and that idea has to be rendered in written form. And that is really, really powerful. And one of my favorite communities on the site where you see that manifested so deeply is Change My View. It's literally a community that is dedicated to inviting people with opposing viewpoints to challenge you, your perceptions, your assumptions about a given matter, whether it's the Electoral College or abortion, or your faith. And that is one of the most impressive and salient aspects of Reddit as a platform, because we're increasingly in a social media environment where everyone chooses their echo chamber and stays there.
That's great. Thank you for sharing. Thank you all. I want to shift gears a little bit. Reddit has been in the news a lot the last 2 years. Everything from executive change, CEO change, AMAs, and the press has this, I feel like this, again, love-to-hate story with Reddit as well. We had a media panel earlier. I didn't know if you tried to meet them backstage or anything. But what have you learned over the past couple of years at Reddit with all the changes, and yeah, that's what I was wondering. What have you learned in the past couple of years? And can we, if Reddit is the voice of the internet, I feel like there's a sense of responsibility that people have on Reddit to say, if you're our voice, or if you're our platform, then internally and externally reflect that. So whatever you learned over the past couple of years, with all this growth that we're projecting, that it's not going to be like that.
So, no, I know what you mean about the love-hate relationship in the press. We've all lived it, quite a bit. When I came back to Reddit on my first day, what I told everybody was, I'm going to make you proud to work at Reddit, and we're going to make the world proud that we exist in it. It was a time of frustration for us, because while we internally knew how wonderful Reddit is and all of the magical things that happen on Reddit, the stories that we've shared today, that story wasn't always getting told publicly, and that's something we've put a conscious effort in, is making sure that we are telling our story and making sure the world knows what's happening on Reddit, because there's a lot of very special things. And at the same time, what you're mentioning about Reddit in some ways being the voice of the internet, I do think we have a bit of an obligation, a moral obligation, to make sure that everybody's voices are heard and that one group isn't dominating the conversation. And that's actually something we've been putting a lot of effort into in the last year, is making sure that what you see on Reddit is all-encompassing, and we don't allow troublemaker users, for example, to dominate the conversation. And that's as much a technology problem as it is a people problem internally. But it's something we've put a lot of effort into, and I think the results over the last year speak for themselves.
Yeah, and I think just to underscore what Steve is saying, I mean, we're 140 people servicing over, now 250 million monthly active users. The size of the company is like laughable in consideration of everything of like where Reddit is and all of. I mean, we probably would all have a giant list of 40 things that we should be doing and could be doing. And as Katelin's point, like, this is a marathon. We all signed up for long-term jobs. We have a lot of work to do, and there's a lot of things. There's 100 things we want to do from a product perspective, a corporate debt perspective, how we work with brands, how we build our teams. That we're just getting started.
I'd like to add the opportunity that we actually have this in a recruiting standpoint. I think, when I was choosing to join the company, a lot of people asked me, like, really, Reddit? And I think that the beautiful opportunity we have from a recruiting standpoint is that not just the growth and the amazing, opportunity, like engineers, you want traffic? We got traffic, like it's no problem. Just from like a brand perspective, but from this notion that we have been through a lot and we are here, there's a really powerful draw towards building something that is so unique and so different that it's almost even hard to describe. I remember when I was at Pixar and Brad Bird, there was this mythology around starting the new film, The Incredibles, and Brad Bird came and said, okay, this is a movie that we have never made before, unlike any other film we've ever made. Give me your misfits, give me your outcasts. And that lived on through Pixar's culture, in that like, if you want to create something truly new, truly innovative, something that the world has never seen before, you are going to want the people from the far, deep, dark corners of the world to come and build it for you, because they are thinking unlike anyone else. And so we say all the time at Reddit, and my team will laugh, but every pot has its lid. We are not for everyone. And we don't want to be for everyone in terms of who we are and what we believe and what our cultural values are and our behaviors and our standards and our agreed upon measures of success with one another and how we choose to engage. So the opportunity to come and really be yourself, if that's what we believe for our platform, we believe that just as much for our employees. And so to be able to have that safe space to be an outcast, to be a misfit, is something that is deeply part of our DNA.
Okay, that's awesome. Zubair, you work in sales and brands and so forth. There's this saying we have in a lot in the diverse cultures, is that we're the consumers, not the owners. But now you're on the opposite side of reaching those consumers, right?
Yes.
And how are you convincing the managers and other executives on your team to really focus on diverse communities and target those to work with Reddit? And what are some lessons you're learning with that challenge, that opportunity?
I think everything that the panel here has said sort of speaks for itself about their receptivity to diversity. I don't have to push on that. But as far as educating the market, which is where our chief challenge is, we impress upon brands and the agencies that represent them the diversity of Reddit. Reddit represents a multiplicity of every person that's on the site. If you represent an ethnic extraction and also a geographic space and a political affiliation, there are communities for each one of those facets of your being. And brands, as in, I would say much of the popular press coverage about Reddit presumes that the Reddit community is in fact one monolith, and as I mentioned earlier, it's 45,000 active communities. So we spend a lot of time educating brands about that and encouraging them to understand and appreciate the depth that people will bring to the platform. And the fact that, I shared Change My View earlier as an example community. What do brands care about? They care about driving changes in perceptions or driving attitudinal lift. And if they can, drive purchase behavior. On Reddit, we are a particularly effective space for the former, for driving brand awareness, for driving brand favorability, because people are in the mode of being honest as contributors to the platform, and by extension of trusting that what they're hearing from others on it are their honest points of view. And so when a brand comes to us and says, we want to work with you, we can point them towards communities that are huge evangelists of them, whether the brand is aware of it or not, and use those people as basically a word-of-mouth engine for the brand. So that's basically how we work. And we are a smallish team, given, as Missy mentioned earlier, the relative size of the site. But we're spending a lot of our time doing that.
It's great. Good to hear that Reddit is reaching out to diverse communities. I'm going to switch to Steve and talk about the VC industry a little bit. You work with YC. You went through YC, and now you do some investment. And how important is it for you to be the example to support diverse communities, to support diverse entrepreneurs with your background, your experience? One of the co-founders from Asana, Justin, I did a fireside chat with him this morning from Asana, and not the pattern match. But we know the story is kind of cliche. It's like, I started coding when I was 10, you know, those type of things. And now, you know, you're millionaires, executives that run companies, and we're having a conversation about diversity. How important is it that we get more diverse entrepreneurs and your role into that?
Sure. There's a couple, I think, dimensions to this question. As it relates to YC and investments, so I went through YC twice over the last 10 years. YC's actually been one of the leaders in this space. One of their founders, Jessica, has been a loud voice in diversity in tech. And YC, in the companies they funded in the last batch, 25% had a female co-founder, and 20% had a underrepresented minority co-founder. So they're making big strides, putting an active effort in there. As it relates to myself, I believe very much in giving people the opportunities. You know, I've been so fortunate to have grown up with computers, grown up with the internet, and have discovered my passion early on, but not everybody has had that advantage. I spend a fair amount of my time these days volunteering with organizations that teach people to code. The last year specifically, it's been with Hackbright, which is an organization in San Francisco that teaches women to be software engineers as like a second career. I love those sorts of organizations, both because it allows me to program, which I don't get to do at work anymore, and also because I believe that the ability to program is like having a superpower, and it doesn't require a lifetime of learning to achieve that. Especially when you come at it like a lot of folks do when it's a second career, what's a career change, where they come in with a chip on their shoulder and they're ready to prove themselves and work really hard. It's a ton of fun working with those folks. It's a great recruiting advantage for us. And at the same time, we're, I think, making our industry a little bit better. I believe very much in Hackbright's mission, you know, change the ratio, and I'm very proud to be a part of it.
Great, thank you, thank you. I want to ask kind of one personal question directly related to Reddit. What's your favorite subreddit group? And if there was a subreddit group that you wish other people knew about, which one would it be?
You would say change
prep them for that question.
My favorite is probably Ask Historians. Ask Historians, yeah.
I like black ladies.
Black ladies?
Yeah.
Reddit, subreddit.
Reddit, subreddit, black ladies. A lot of interesting conversations.
That's good to know. I mean, I wouldn't know about it.
There's black fellas, too.
Now, that one I should know about.
Yeah.
All right, okay.
They were talking about the bevel shaving system, whether they liked it or not,
Okay,
you know.
Okay, all right. I'm sure. Yeah, okay.
Well, you did not prep us for this question, so I'm going to go with what just like straight came to my head. r/dad jokes. So dad jokes, they're all like the worst jokes ever made, but I have a 2-year-old, and so I hit dad jokes at least once a day.
Got it, got it.
I want to pick two. I really love Black people Twitter. I just think it's so...
I got to cut you on that. The subreddit, Black people Twitter.
Yeah.
Yes.
So it's like the Black Twitter on Reddit.
Yeah.
Okay.
It's better than Twitter. I said it. And
well, you have more than 140 characters.
Exactly.
Right?
You can have an actual conversation on it.
And you have multiple conversations.
Yeah.
And the second one that I love, just because of my background, I worked on a business intelligence product before I came to Reddit, is Data is Beautiful. So
oh, yeah.
if you've ever seen that thing, like if you're a data geek, you will love Data is Beautiful. They will take data and make the most fascinating charts and representations. I geek out over it. So.
Got it, Steve?
So I got a couple. Actually, I like Black people Twitter too.
Steve, I saw your excitement. You just changed a different person. You're like, I'm gonna talk about my favorite subreddit. This is my.
So I'm serious. Hey, it's good. It's good stuff. They generate culture faster than anybody else. That community on Reddit. I also really like the cultural zeitgeist communities, so around like TV shows. So right now,
Game of Thrones is good.
Westworld, I'm super into the show, and Reddit for like shows like Westworld and The Night Of and Game of Thrones and all that stuff. When those shows are happening, like we are like the center of the universe for all the like fan theories and all that junk, which I like totally get addicted to. So I love that too.
And if anyone doesn't have their Halloween costume yet, the subreddit Halloween, the best costumes I have ever seen. They're so good. And they're like DIY, like, oh, you could do this with your own closet right now.
Oh.
Nice. I'm gonna make a slight confession. I'm a gamer, a mobile gamer, but just for one game.
Which one?
It's the Marvel Contest of Champions. It's like my getaway. I don't want to think about tech, I don't want to think about diversity. It's Wayne time.
Yeah.
There's a subreddit on Marvel Contest of Champions.
Yeah.
And that's my personal time. I'm on the subreddit, and we're learning about codes and cheats and best practices to get high score, gold. And so I'm a mobile gamer for that one game.
Okay.
And last question. And we touched on this at the beginning, but I want to hear it from the heart, right? Why is it important for you all to be here today? Like, we all here are focused on solutions around diversity, inclusion, and tech. Reddit is the front page of the internet, has its history, and to put it in perspective, there's some other companies that was already previously named, has 300 million users and about 3,000 staff. Reddit has less than 200 staff, 240 million users. So put it in perspective. It's a small team, 240 million users, and planning to grow. You want to grow, you want to focus on diversity, you want to focus on inclusion, not just from a culture perspective, from a hiring perspective, but also from a customer perspective. Why is it important for you all to be here, and can we trust you with the responsibility?
I mean, I think as a company and as a site, diversity is an existential challenge for us. Every hire that I make and every person on my team, their feeling of inclusion or safety or the degree to which they feel comfortable on the team will beget the next experience or the next person, and whether or not we're able to bring the next person on, and whether they'll find a home once they're here. And you know, that's very clear to me. I'd say also as a personal matter, I didn't bring this up at any point in the past, but I'd say in this, you know, you talk about Nick. You know, I'm still getting to know Nick because he's all of 2 weeks in. You know, speaking for myself, I'd say every person in my position also has an opportunity to beget the next Zubair, so to say. I happen to be ethnically Syrian. And I remember actually the way that I started on the path of joining startups was outreaching to an entrepreneur who was the first of his kind, the first person I knew in the Syrian American community who had been funded by Sequoia. And I was like, you're like Jackie Robinson. Congratulations. And he said, come on in, I'd love to meet you. 15-person company, and he gave me an opportunity. And so, you know, these are, I'm sure, part of each of our personal legacies, and it's imperative that we perpetuate those.
Thank you. Melissa?
Yeah, I mean, I think, you know, I think for me, I think the thing that I really appreciate and what I've always said about working with Steve is, look, it's really fun to have a seat at the table to come up with solutions. And I think in terms of being yourself, I'm extraordinarily opinionated. I don't hold back. I probably should at times, but you know, Steve might laugh, but
I'm laughing.
You know, I can send him a video on white privilege and we can have a conversation about it. We can engage, I mean, I can say this is important to me, and as a CEO, like, it's not just me as the black female on the executive team having the conversation. Like, he's super happy, like, to have that conversation and to say it's important, and you know, that to me is extraordinarily important. And you know, it's certainly something I've thought about as I looked at startups and thought about where I want to go after Google, because in my world, David was one of my execs. Like, he's, you know, I sort of, you know, looked at him and sort of thought, like, that's really fun. And sort of the role that he plays within Google is something for me that I've always, you know, that's what I have to live up to. Like, he plucked, you know, I was applied online, you know, worked at Google for 8 years, and now I'm here. I have the same responsibility that he had.
Yeah, I think that for each of us there is a component of pay it forward. You know, each of us were given an opportunity by somebody who said, I see something in you. I see beyond what it is that I'm looking at. And so there's a deep sense of wanting to pay that forward times, you know, 100 and then some. From just like a really personal standpoint, I think the importance of diversity and inclusion is it just makes everything better. To think about, I mean, I look out in the audience and I see so many people from our own team, and they're fun, they're weird in their own wild, crazy ways, but each one of them brings something different to the table that I find deeply rewarding. So things are more interesting, conversations are more lively, we're challenging each other in ways and pushing our product in new dimensions that it hadn't before. But more than that, like, I mean, even just looking here, like, I've learned something from everyone. Like, this lady has taught me more than a thing or two since I've been there, and has really challenged the way I've approached things or thought about things. So from like a personal development standpoint, it's just better, and it's just a lot more fun. Can we have a little bit of fun too?
That's right.
From a personal perspective, I mean, the reason I come to events like this and the reason I think about it all goes back to what I said earlier, which is I made it out of PG County, Maryland. Pretty much all of my friends are still there. And you know, for me, it was all a dream. You know, this life, this opportunity is amazing, and I want to be the type of person who gives back and shows others who came from my situation that it's possible. And you know, I think what better opportunity to do it on a platform like Reddit that's huge. So I'm going to use the role as an executive on the Reddit team to really hopefully be an example and inspire others. So.
Great. Steve?
Sure. So I already mentioned earlier how we want our platform to be as diverse as possible. In order to do that, the company needs to be as diverse as possible as well. And that is true. That is a very real business need for us. But then there's also another aspect to it, which is we're a very small company, and one of the fun things about running your own company is you get to build it in whatever image you want, and that's what we're doing. And we get to build a company that we want to work at that reflects our values. And it's funny, when I look back about a year ago, things were very chaotic, and one of the first things we had to do was Missy and I basically had to go toe-to-toe with 100 million people and try to articulate our views on free speech. And that was really tough. And I couldn't have done it, without her and without her perspective. I remember at one time just thinking, this is crazy, what the hell am I doing? And at the other hand, I've never felt more alive. And I think when you have all of those different viewpoints and sets of talents and perspectives, you can do some really incredible things. And that makes work not work. It makes it very fulfilling. And that's why I'm happy to be here, and I think we're all happy to be here tackling these issues together.
Can I add one small thing? Sorry. More important, I think, than the earlier point I made is I actually don't know. I have a lot of blind spots. We all bring some amount of privilege into our roles. I'll give you the example that comes to mind. I've tried to set up a mentorship series for my team, and I scheduled a few speakers who had grown through different career ladders, business development, marketing, sales, and I checked in with a team member after I had done a couple of these and asked them, how do you feel about what you're seeing from this so far? And her feedback was, it's okay. What I'd really like to see is more colored women. And I was totally blind to that. And so the only way I'm going to learn what I'm not seeing is by continuing to be open and continuing to hire people who represent,
going to challenge you,
who are going to challenge my fundamental assumptions.
That's great. Thank you for sharing that. Thank you all. I have to ask this other question because it came up. There's two topics I want to cover, but I think I'm just going to do one because I heard white privilege twice. I didn't say it, you said it. But then also we talk about free speech and Reddit being the front page of the internet, the free speech and policies and there's this saying we also have in our communities about if the teams were more diverse, especially the engineering teams, then some of these problems wouldn't exist. But then there's the free speech, there's the engineering team, then there's like the product. You have addressed some of that over the past couple of years. What were the biggest challenges from a community perspective? Because I do know that it wasn't all seen well. People are like, oh, Reddit is changing. So what was some of the challenges around from a community perspective, a policy perspective, and the keeping the free speech perspective and the voice of Reddit kind of the same? Like what do you learn from all of that? And how's that going forward?
I mean, I think I guess just as the policy person, I think the part that I find, I come from Google and sort of a legal background, and I think especially as sort of a black female, I really think it's important to allow people to speak and to have a place where you can say things that are not within the status quo. I think we've done a much better job over the past 12 months or year and a half in terms of dealing with harassment and things of that nature. Like, there are certain things that should not be tolerated. But I do firmly believe that disagreement and difference is okay. And I think as a platform in particular, we don't want to dictate to our users or the world sort of what's okay and what's not okay. That feels uncomfortable to me. We all have different perspectives. For us to try and do that would be extraordinarily painful and problematic. But I just think from from the policy and legal perspective, I just find it extraordinarily important to create a platform in which should you be attacked on the platform and should somebody come at you and say X, Y, and Z? No, especially like one of the biggest things we did was implement a blocking tool, which didn't exist a year and a half ago. And creating a product and sort of technical solutions around some of these issues, I think is extraordinarily helpful. And I think with credit to the team, we have prioritized that as being important, and not sort of and not sat back and sort of said like there's not much we can do, but thinking about it, how do we solve some of this at scale?
Great.
Yeah, one of the challenges we had when we start talking about free speech, it's an incredibly complex issue. And we had to spend a fair amount of time discussing internally just to articulate what our own viewpoints were, let alone how do we, how do we express that to the community. And through a lot of conversation, we basically found our viewpoint, which is we want Reddit to be as broad as possible. We also want Reddit to be as welcoming as possible. And we can't achieve that if some people are taking that away from others. And so while we allow viewpoints on Reddit that we don't agree with, sometimes vehemently disagree with, we do think it's important to not present a sanitized view of humanity. But at the same time, we need to make sure that everybody has a home on Reddit and that they feel safe and welcome in those places. And a lot of that comes from our policy decisions and our actions we take with regard to communities. And another chunk of that is technology work, where we've been actively investing in anti-abuse and anti-harassment, investing in our trust and safety team, which is the people side of the company that actually makes a lot of these decisions now. We've got a long way to go, but we've also come a long way. And so that gives me a lot of hope that we will continually make progress as we kind of learn and develop.
That's great. That's great. And on that note, I want to invite you all back next year and see how much progress has been made. Again, what lessons you have learned throughout this journey, and excited to see how Reddit, the front page of the internet, is doing. It's cool.
We'll do it.
All right. Okay. Great. I got a commitment. Melissa said.
See you next year.
All right. Cool.
Sorry, guys.
All right. Well, thank you all, and for joining us. Thank you.
Thanks.
Wayne.
I
I'm very unsure about these.